The night had been silent, too silent for a house that big. Wind pressed against the glass walls of the mansion, whispering through cracks money couldn't seal. In the study, dim light from the monitors painted the billionaire's face in cold blue. Rows of camera feeds flickered, the usual. Empty halls, sleeping staff quarters, the glittering driveway lined with cars worth more than countries. He wasn't supposed to be awake, but insomnia had become his closest companion lately, an old ghost that visited whenever the house got too quiet. He leaned back, rubbing his temples, until something small, something fragile, broke the silence. A sound. A sob, faint at first, almost swallowed by static. He froze, adjusted the volume. Then came a child's voice, thin, trembling, desperate. "I'll be good. Please. I'll be good." His stomach dropped. He clicked to the next feed. Then the next. The sound grew louder. His pulse started to drum in his ears. Until, finally, he found it. Camera 14, Nursery Hall. The feed wavered, black and white grain dancing like ghosts. A small figure sat on the edge of her bed. His daughter, Lily, 8 years old, bare feet on the carpet, pajamas wrinkled. Her little hands clutched her teddy bear like a shield, and behind her, a taller silhouette, elegant, controlled, motionless for a second. Then, movement. The woman stepped into the light. His wife. Her face, calm, cold, unreadable. The same face that smiled for the magazines. The same hands that shook politicians' hands and raised champagne glasses at charity galas. But now those hands were clenched. He leaned closer to the screen, breath fogging the glass. His heart pounded so loudly it nearly drowned out the next sound. A sharp crack, not loud but unmistakable. The teddy bear slipped from Lily's hands. She whispered again, "I'll be good." The camera trembled for a moment as if even the house wanted to look away. He couldn't move, couldn't blink. Every muscle in his body locked. There had to be an explanation. There had to be. His mind refused the images his eyes were feeding him. Maybe it was an illusion, a trick of light, a misunderstanding, a one-in-a-million coincidence. But then his wife's lips moved. Her voice came through, low, sharp, like a blade sliding through silk. "You embarrass me again, and I'll make sure you never forget it." He pressed his fist against his mouth to keep from making a sound. Lily curled up, whispering apologies to her bear, her little shoulders shaking. The billionaire, the man known for conquering boardrooms, bankrupting rivals, building empires, sat, frozen, powerless, staring at a truth that no wealth could buy his way out of. For a full minute, he didn't breathe. Then, without realizing, he reached for the mouse. Replay. Once, twice, again. Every click cut deeper. The feed flickered, each replay sharpening the horror, erasing denial. There was no trick, no misunderstanding. It was real. His hands trembled. He could feel the old scar on his palm, a reminder of the first factory he'd ever built. Back then, pain had meant progress. Now it just meant something was breaking. Inside. He pushed the chair back and stood abruptly, the wheels scraping against marble. For a moment, he thought of storming into her room, demanding answers, tearing down the walls of silence. But the house was sleeping, or pretending to. Every room a witness, every shadow holding secrets. Instead, he just stood there, a man surrounded by 27 cameras and not a single ounce of control. He looked at the red recording light blinking on the corner of the screen. Each pulse felt like a heartbeat. Hers, his daughter's, theirs. Then, without warning, the feed glitched. White noise, static, a ripple-like interference. When the image returned, the room was empty. No wife, no daughter, just the teddy bear, face down on the carpet. He stared at it, couldn't look away. The silence returned, heavier now, suffocating. That was when something shifted in him. He reached over and muted the monitor, but his hands stayed frozen above the mouse. His reflection stared back at him from the screen. Tired eyes, clenched jaw, veins visible at the temple. He whispered to himself, voice breaking, "What did you do?" And then, the soft creak of a door behind him. He turned. There she was, his wife, framed in the doorway, wearing a satin robe, hair immaculate, smile faint. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked gently, voice honeyed, eyes sharp. He glanced at the muted screens, the frozen image of the nursery behind her. His mouth went dry. Just Checking something, he managed. Her gaze lingered on the monitors, just long enough to see what he'd been watching. And then, like a predator pretending not to smell blood, she smiled again. "You work too much," she murmured. "Come to bed." He forced a nod, but his legs didn't move. She waited a moment longer, eyes narrowing, then turned and left, the soft click of her heels fading down the hallway. He waited until the sound disappeared completely. Then, with shaking hands, he rewound the footage again. The red light blinked. The whisper echoed. "I'll be good. Please." And that was the moment the billionaire knew. The empire he'd built on glass was about to shatter. Morning sunlight spilled through glass walls, cutting across polished marble like a blade. The mansion looked perfect again, flawlessly staged, eerily still. But beneath that perfection, something had changed. Something alive in the night had died. At the head of the breakfast table, he stirred his coffee without tasting it. The spoon clinked softly against porcelain, steady, rhythmic, mechanical. His daughter sat across from him, her small frame half swallowed by the enormous chair. She stared at her cereal, eyes distant, spoon unmoving. The wife hummed from the kitchen, same tune as always, soft, lilting, careless. Her hair was immaculate, her silk robe tied in a neat bow. She looked like an advertisement for calm mornings and happy families. Only he could see the fracture lines beneath it. "Lily, sweetheart," she called, her tone dripping with honey. "Eat up. We have a busy day ahead." The girl flinched at the sound of her name. It was so small a motion that no one else might have noticed. But he did. Because now, he was watching everything. He cleared his throat. "Did you sleep well, Lily?" Her spoon trembled. "Uh-huh," she whispered. Not yes, not no, just survival. His wife smiled, gliding across the room to pour him another cup of coffee. "She's fine," she said smoothly, without looking at him. "A bit tired, that's all. Kids and their dreams." Her hand brushed his shoulder as she placed the cup down, that same hand he'd seen clenched into a fist mere hours ago. His chest tightened. He looked at her wrist, at the diamond bracelet gleaming under the morning light. It caught the sun and threw fractured reflections across the room. Yesterday, he'd loved that bracelet. He'd bought it himself for her birthday. Today, it looked like a weapon. "She's not usually scared of mornings," he murmured. His wife froze for a fraction of a second, just a heartbeat. Then she turned, smiling that perfect smile. "Scared? Don't be ridiculous." The girl's cereal spoon slipped from her fingers and clattered against the bowl. Milk splashed across the tablecloth. The wife's smile faltered. "Lily," she said sharply, voice tightening, "look what you've done." The little girl's lip trembled. "I'm sorry," he cut in before the next word could form. "It's fine. She's fine." His tone was calm, but his pulse thundered in his ears. He reached for a napkin and cleaned the spill himself. His wife stood still, hand frozen midair, eyes flashing briefly with something dark before smoothing back into serenity. Silence settled again. Heavy, uncomfortable, the kind of silence you could drown in. He looked around the house, every surface gleaming, every corner symmetrical. He'd built this life on control. No surprises, no noise. And yet last night, a single flicker of sound had destroyed all of it. The wife sat across from him now, sipping her coffee as though nothing existed beyond that porcelain cup. "You work too much," she said lightly. "That's why you see problems where there aren't any." He smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. Maybe. Inside, something cold was crawling up his spine. He wanted to ask her what she'd been doing in Lily's room last night. He wanted to see her face when he said he'd watched, but he didn't. Not yet. There was too much she could twist, too much she could hide behind that silk voice. Instead, he turned to Lily. "Sweetheart, why don't we do something together later? Just you and me?" Her eyes flicked to her mother, instinctively, reflexively, seeking permission. That single glance told him everything he needed to know. "She has piano lessons," the wife answered smoothly, "and dance practice after. You know how we agreed on structure." He forced his smile to stay. Of course. But inside he could feel it, his anger, his guilt, his disbelief, all sharpening into something dangerous. He'd spent years perfecting this family's image, the billionaire, the philanthropist, the man who could fix anything with money. Yet here he was, sitting across from a terrified child and a woman who could slice a person's soul in half with one glance. The walls gleamed around him, every reflection showing the same scene from a different angle, just like the cameras. So many eyes watching, and still no one had seen. When breakfast ended, Lily slipped away quietly, clutching her teddy bear. His wife leaned over and kissed his cheek. "Don't overthink," she whispered. "You always do when you're tired." Her perfume was sweet, familiar, suffocating. As she disappeared down the hall, he stared at the camera mounted discreetly above the dining room doorway. The tiny red light blinked in rhythm with his heartbeat, a home built on glass, perfect from afar, hollow from within. He pushed back from the table, jaw tight, and whispered under his breath, "Let's see what you've been hiding in the daylight." The decision was made. Tonight, he'd watch every second. The day crawled forward, slow and cruel. Meetings blurred together, voices droned through his earpiece, numbers rolled across screens. But none of it registered. The world that once revolved around his empire now spun around a single image, a little girl whispering, "I'll be good." By noon, he'd made up his mind. He shut his office door, dismissed his assistant, and logged into the mansion's security feed from his private laptop. The moment the familiar grid of cameras appeared, his throat went dry. He clicked camera 14. There it was again. That room. That night. He hit play. At first, it looked the same. His daughter, small and trembling, the wife's shadow looming like a dark ribbon behind her. But he wasn't looking at the people this time. He was looking at details. He zoomed in. The corner of the screen caught something, a reflection in the glass of the nightstand, a flash of the wife's hand raised mid-motion. The bracelet. That diamond bracelet gleaming like a cruel halo. He replayed it, slower this time. The sound of the slap echoed softly through the speakers. Then, Lily's quiet cry followed, not loud, not dramatic. Just a sound that broke a father in half. "I'll be good, please. I'll be good." He felt the air leave his lungs. Each repetition stripped away his denial like skin peeling under flame. He pressed pause. The image froze. The wife's shadow towering over the child, one hand midair, the girl cowering, the teddy bear halfway to the floor. He stared at it until the screen blurred. There was no misunderstanding left, no excuse elegant enough to hide behind. For years he'd been praised for his instincts, for seeing what others missed, for anticipating betrayal before it happened. Yet in the one place it mattered most, he'd been blind. And worse, he'd built the cage himself. Cameras everywhere, walls of glass, a palace designed for surveillance, for safety, and somehow evil had bloomed right under that perfect design. He hit play again, different timestamps, different nights. The footage flickered, Lily sitting up at midnight, her small frame shaking as she wiped tears on her sleeve. Another night, the wife's shadow by the doorway, the door closing slowly, sound cutting off. He kept watching. Hours passed. His body stayed still, but inside he was unraveling. The feeds moved like ghosts through time. He clicked through camera after camera, piecing together fragments of moments he was never meant to see. Lily crying into her pillow. The wife pacing the hallway, whispering to herself. A hand yanking a toy from the child's fingers. A shove that sent a stuffed rabbit rolling across the floor. Each scene was a wound. Quiet, intimate, brutal. He tried to tell himself there was context. Maybe discipline gone wrong. Maybe misunderstanding. Maybe he'd walked in too late to see the truth. But deep down, he knew. This wasn't a moment. It was a pattern. And he had missed it because he'd been busy. Because board meetings and stock prices had felt more urgent than bedtime stories and bruised emotions. He replayed one particular clip, Lily sitting by her window, whispering into the dark. "Daddy, where are you?" He didn't remember that night, didn't remember hearing it, but she had said it, and the cameras had kept it for him, a message stored in silence. His hand shook as he reached for the whiskey bottle on his desk. He poured until the glass overflowed. The liquid rippled in rhythm with the blinking red light on the feed. He stared at the woman on the screen, his wife, brushing the child's hair roughly, then forcing a smile when she noticed the camera above her. That smile, that calculated awareness. She knew. That was the moment he felt the first true chill of fear. Not for his daughter, Not yet, but for himself, for what he was capable of doing once he stopped pretending. He closed the laptop slowly, the screen fading to black. His own reflection stared back, hollow eyes, clenched jaw, trembling hand. He whispered, almost to himself, "You've been living with a stranger." A knock at the door startled him. His assistant's voice filtered through the wood. "Sir, the partners are waiting for your signature." He didn't answer, just sat there, staring at the blank laptop screen. His empire wanted his attention, but his world, the only world that mattered, was falling apart. After a long silence, he opened the laptop again, one last time. He copied the footage to a private drive. Then he opened the security system's timeline history, the logs no one ever looked at, dozens of deleted clips, weeks missing, days overwritten. He leaned back, realization hitting like cold water. This wasn't random. She'd been curating what he saw, controlling the cameras, controlling him. And still, something inside her had slipped last night, one moment of arrogance, one flicker of oversight. And the truth had leaked through. He exhaled shakily. For the first time, he wasn't sure whether he was more terrified of what she'd done or what she was willing to keep doing. The next line he muttered wasn't a threat. It was a vow. "You'll never touch her again." Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. Inside, the screens flickered, the red lights blinking like silent alarms, as if the mansion itself could feel the storm coming. The ballroom shimmered with gold. Crystal chandeliers hung like cages of light, reflecting laughter, wealth, and everything he used to believe in. It was the annual Hearts of the City charity gala, her favorite event of the year, her stage. She glided through the crowd like royalty, every gesture measured, every smile a promise. Cameras flashed, hands reached for hers. Reporters whispered, "That's Evelyn Harrow, the perfect wife, the philanthropist, the woman who built his heart into an empire." He stood a few feet away, watching. Once he would have been proud. Tonight he could barely breathe. Her laughter rose above the music, gentle and rehearsed. It carried easily across the ballroom. He caught himself staring at the way she touched people's arms when she spoke, the practiced sincerity in her eyes. No one in this room saw the shadows behind them. He'd seen it. He'd heard it. The sound of his daughter's voice still echoed in his head, faint and trembling. "I'll be good." "Sir?" his assistant murmured, offering him a glass of champagne. He waved it away. "Everything all right?" the man asked quietly. He nodded, forcing composure. "Fine." But his voice cracked on that one syllable. Because across the room, Evelyn had just bent down to greet a young girl, someone else's child. Her hand brushed the girl's hair with such care that the mother smiled warmly, oblivious. His jaw tightened. He could feel his pulse in his throat. She rose, caught his gaze from across the room, and smiled, a perfect, public smile, as if nothing had ever happened. He raised his glass and returned it, two performers playing their roles on cue. The evening blurred into meaningless conversations. He shook hands with investors, nodded through speeches, laughed when people expected him to. But all the while, his mind replayed the same scene, the trembling child, the sound of her mother's voice cutting through the dark. When the dinner began, they were seated side by side at the head table. Cameras lingered on them, the power couple, philanthropists of the year. Her perfume was soft and sweet, the same one that lingered in the nursery the night before. The scent now turned his stomach. "You're quiet tonight," she whispered, leaning close so only he could hear. "Long day," he replied. "Meetings." Her tone was playful, teasing. "You should smile more. People notice." He turned to look at her, really look, the diamond earrings, the soft curve of her lips, the way she tilted her head in mock affection, all performance, all lies. "They notice everything," he said softly. She chuckled, sipping her wine. "That's why we never make mistakes, darling." He felt a tremor run through his chest. She didn't know yet. She didn't know what he'd seen. But the way she said "we never make mistakes" felt like a taunt. Midway through the evening, she took the stage for her speech. He watched her glide beneath the chandeliers, radiant, beloved, untouchable. "We believe every child deserves a safe home," she began, voice smooth as silk. A ripple of applause. His fingers curled around the tablecloth. The hypocrisy of it burned. He could feel his breath shortening, every word she spoke slicing deeper. "We build homes for the forgotten," she continued. "We protect innocence." The crowd rose to their feet, clapping. Cameras flashed. He didn't move. She stood there, smiling through the applause, the perfect image of grace. And in that moment, he realized something chilling. She wasn't just lying to the world. She was feeding on it. The admiration, the attention. It was her fuel. It gave her power. It made her untouchable. When she returned to the table, flushed with triumph, she leaned in close again. "You looked like you were about to cry," she teased softly. "Maybe I was," he murmured, voice steady but cold. "Some performances deserve tears." Her smile faltered just slightly, only for an instant, but he caught it. And in that flicker, he saw it. Awareness. She knew something was different about him tonight. Later, as the music swelled and the guests danced, he slipped away, out the side door, into the quiet hallway where portraits of their family hung. His eyes drifted to one, the three of them on the beach, laughing, sunlit. The lie of it made his hands shake. A soft voice broke his trance. "You left early." He turned. Evelyn stood in the doorway, the hem of her gown brushing the marble, her smile sharpened to a blade. "You didn't enjoy the show?" she asked. "I did," he said. "I just couldn't tell if it was theater or confession." Her eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I watched you, Evelyn." He stepped closer. "Last night, on the cameras." The color drained from her face, but only for a second. Then she laughed, light and dismissive. "You're imagining things. You're overtired. Honestly, love, you should—" "Don't!" His voice snapped like thunder in the quiet hall. "Don't talk to me like I'm one of your donors." Silence. The music from the ballroom leaked faintly through the doors, violins and laughter floating through the tension like ghosts. Evelyn tilted her head, assessing him. Then her smile returned, slower, more deliberate this time. "You think you know what you saw," she whispered, "but you don't know me." "No," he said softly, eyes glinting. "That's the problem. I finally do." They stood inches apart, her perfume sweet and suffocating, his anger coiled like wire. For the first time, he saw fear flicker in her eyes. Not much, just enough to prove she understood that something in him had shifted forever. "Go back inside," she said finally, voice trembling beneath its calm. "People will wonder." He didn't move. Let them. When she turned away, he caught her reflection in the mirror. Perfect posture, poised smile, predator wrapped in silk. The crowd erupted in applause again, but neither of them clapped. That night, when they returned home, he didn't sleep. He sat in the dark study, staring at the footage again. Only this time, he watched with new eyes. Every frame was a mask peeling off. Every lie she'd ever told was there, hiding in plain sight. And tomorrow, he promised himself, he'd find out just how deep her performance went. The next morning, sunlight filled the mansion again, soft, golden, and deceitful. Everything looked normal. Everything pretended to be normal. But the walls carried silence differently now. It wasn't the quiet of peace. It was the quiet of fear. He found Lily in her room, sitting by the window, her small knees drawn to her chest. The crayons beside her lay untouched. Blank paper stared back from the desk, bright white, painfully empty. A month ago, those same walls were covered in color, rainbows, butterflies, stick figure families holding hands under a smiling sun. He used to joke that she was turning the house into a gallery, but now the drawings were gone, torn down, erased. "You're not drawing anymore," he said softly, stepping into the room. She turned, startled. Her eyes widened for a moment, then she lowered her gaze. "I don't feel like it." He knelt beside her chair, lowering himself to her level. The air smelled faintly of lavender soap and dust. He tried to smile. "Why not? You always loved drawing." She shrugged. A small motion, but it spoke volumes. Her little fingers fidgeted with the hem of her sleeve. There was a faint bruise near her wrist, faded like a ghost of something that should never have been there. "Did you hurt yourself?" he asked gently, reaching out. She pulled her hand back quickly. "No, I'm fine." Her voice was soft, mechanical, like something practiced. He'd heard that same tone in corporate boardrooms when people lied to survive. "Lily," he whispered, "you can tell me anything. You know that, right? Her lips trembled. For a second, he thought she might cry. Instead, she forced a small smile, the kind of smile a child gives when they're too scared to speak. Mommy says I should be good. Good girls don't complain. The words hit him harder than any accusation could. He froze. The phrase. The same phrase from the footage. I'll be good, please. Now, stripped of fear, it had become doctrine. He looked around the room again. Her stuffed toys were arranged perfectly on the shelves, too perfectly. Everything aligned, symmetrical, no mess, no chaos, no childhood. It was control. His wife's kind of control. He rose to his feet slowly, scanning the space. Then his eyes caught something on the wall, faint outlines where drawings once hung. The adhesive left small, dirty squares behind. And something else. A tiny scrap of paper wedged behind the dresser. He bent down, pulled it free. It was half a drawing, ripped. A child's sketch done in pink crayon. A little girl standing beside a tall woman. The woman's face was scribbled out completely, red marks tearing through the paper. Above it, in uneven letters, I'll be good. He felt something break quietly inside his chest. Daddy, Lily whispered. He quickly folded the paper and slipped it into his pocket. Nothing, sweetheart. Just cleaning up. She watched him carefully, as though gauging whether she'd done something wrong. You didn't do anything bad, he said firmly. Her eyes filled instantly, as if that sentence itself was forbidden. Mommy says mistakes make people angry. His breath caught. He knelt again, voice low, steady. Not with me. Never with me. She nodded, though he could tell she didn't believe it. A knock echoed from the doorway. Evelyn's voice, smooth, musical, cut through the air. Oh, there you two are. Lily flinched so subtly it might have gone unnoticed, but he saw it. Every muscle in her tiny shoulders stiffened. Evelyn stepped into the room, her perfume wrapping the air like smoke. Sweetheart, I told you to clean your desk, she said lightly, eyes gliding over the untouched crayons. I was talking to her, he said quietly. About what? She asked, smiling, but her tone sharpened just slightly underneath. About art, he replied, about how she should start drawing again. Evelyn laughed softly, brushing invisible dust from her sleeve. She's growing up. Kids lose interest. He studied her face. There it was again, the slight tremor at the corner of her mouth when she lied. He'd seen that same tremor when she'd stood on the gala stage claiming she protected children. Let her rest, Evelyn added, voice sweetening again. We don't need another mess before lessons. That word. Mess. He almost snapped right there. Instead, he forced calm. We'll talk later, he said evenly. She tilted her head. About what? About honesty. Her smile faltered. Only for a second. Then she kissed Lily's hair and turned to leave. Come down when you're ready, darling, she said to the child. Mommy's waiting. When she disappeared down the hall, the silence that followed was suffocating. Lily stared at the doorway long after she was gone. Daddy, she whispered, are you mad at me? He felt his throat close. No, sweetheart, never. But as he hugged her gently, his eyes fixed on the door. He could feel his heartbeat thundering beneath his ribs, not from love this time, but from something darker. The kind of anger that doesn't shout, the kind that plans, because he realized something vital. The woman he married didn't just hurt their daughter, she was shaping her, molding her into a creature of obedience and silence, and every minute he waited, that transformation deepened. When he left the room, he glanced once more at the blank sheets of paper on the desk. White, empty, unused. The girl who used to draw her dreams had stopped. Now, all she drew, when no one was looking, were pleas. That night, the mansion felt heavier than ever. Even the chandeliers seemed to hang lower, as if burdened by the secrets they'd absorbed. He sat in his study, staring at the blank wall where the cameras streamed the feeds he no longer trusted. Every click of the grandfather clock was a countdown, not toward sleep but toward something inevitable. When the door creaked open softly, he almost didn't look up. It was the nanny, Marta. She stood in the doorway, hands wringing nervously, face pale. Sir, she whispered, glancing over her shoulder. May I speak with you? Her voice trembled. She looked like a woman holding something too heavy for too long. Of course, he said quietly. Close the door." She hesitated before stepping inside. When the latch clicked shut, her composure cracked. Her eyes darted toward the hallway, then back to him. "I'm leaving," she said suddenly. "Tonight." His brows furrowed. "Leaving? Why?" Her throat tightened. "It's not safe. Not for me, not for her." The worder landed like a knife. He didn't need to ask who. "Marta," he said slowly, "tell me what you know." She shook her head, tears brimming. "I shouldn't. I signed papers. She made me sign. Confidentiality. I could lose everything." He stood, stepping closer. "You've already lost more than that, haven't you?" Her lips quivered. "She told me I was lucky to have this job. She said if I ever spoke out, she'd ruin me. And she can, sir. I've seen her do it." He reached for his wallet automatically. "I'll protect you, whatever it costs." She flinched at the gesture. "This isn't about money." Then, slowly, she reached into her coat pocket and withdrew a small black USB drive. The label was handwritten, faint and trembling. "For you." "I couldn't delete it," she said, voice shaking. "I tried. I swear I tried, but I couldn't live with it on my conscience. Just watch it, sir. Then you'll understand why I have to go." He took the drive from her fingers carefully, as if it were made of glass. "When was this recorded?" "Over the last few months," she whispered. "I used one of the old nursery cameras you'd replaced. She didn't know it was still active." His pulse spiked. "She's been deleting footage," Marta nodded. "She made me hand over the memory cards every week, said it was for privacy." "I knew it wasn't." Silence filled the room like water filling a sinking ship. "Thank you," he said at last, voice thick. "Go, now, before she comes back." Her eyes filled. "Please help her, sir. That child, she still believes it's her fault." He swallowed hard. "I will." She turned and left without another word. The sound of her hurried footsteps down the hall was swallowed by the ticking clock. He sat for a long time before plugging in the USB. The screen blinked, then loaded folders labeled by date. He opened one. The first video began with static, then color bled in. Lily's room. Afternoon light streaming through curtains. The little girl was quietly brushing her doll's hair. A knock on the door. Evelyn entered. Her tone was light, almost playful. "You left your piano unfinished again, didn't you?" The girl froze. "I'm sorry, Mommy, The slap came so fast it blurred. He flinched as if it landed on his own skin. Evelyn's voice cut through the speakers. "Apologies don't fix laziness, do you understand?" Lily nodded, tears spilling silently. He paused the video, heart pounding, eyes wide in disbelief and rage. He forced himself to keep watching, video after video, a pattern, a method, always quiet, always precise, never enough to leave visible marks, just enough to leave invisible ones. In one clip, Evelyn crouched down beside Lily's bed, whispering with frightening calm, "Do you know what happens to girls who make Daddy look bad?" The child's head shook violently. "They make Mommy angry," Evelyn said softly, "and Mommy doesn't like being angry." He pressed pause again, his hand trembling. It wasn't just cruelty. It was control, systematic, calculated, intentional. He pushed his chair back abruptly, breath ragged. For a moment he couldn't move, couldn't think. The man who'd built skyscrapers couldn't even stand on his own legs. Then he did something he hadn't done since childhood. He wept. Not quietly, not politely. His hands covered his face as years of arrogance and blindness collapsed into grief. When the sobs subsided, resolve took their place. Cold, clear. He backed up the files onto 3 separate drives, locking one in the safe, another in his briefcase, and hiding the third beneath the floor vent of his study. For the first time, he realized what true wealth was, not gold or power, but evidence. As he powered down the monitor, he caught a glimpse of his reflection in the dark glass, red-rimmed eyes, tear-streaked cheeks, but something new in the stare. Intent. He whispered to himself, "You taught me how to build empires, Evelyn. Now watch what happens when I decide to burn one down." Outside, the night wind howled against the glass walls. But the house, for once, wasn't the only thing watching. Dinner that evening unfolded beneath a chandelier that glowed too bright, too calm for the storm about to break. The table stretched long between them, polished wood gleaming under candlelight, the silverware perfectly aligned. Every inch of the scene was flawless, a photograph of domestic peace. But under the surface, the air buzzed with static. He hadn't spoken since morning, barely moved, barely breathed. He'd spent the entire day rehearsing every word, every possible outcome. The footage from Marta's drive still played in his mind, looping, searing, inescapable. Each whisper, each slap, each "I'll be good" replayed behind his eyes like a curse. Now, across the table, Evelyn smiled. Her lipstick was red tonight, the same shade as the bracelet she wore, the same hand that had struck his daughter hours before he found the truth. "You're quiet," she said, slicing into her salmon with lazy precision. "Work again?" He didn't answer right away, just watched her, studied her, every delicate gesture, every flick of her eyes. The woman who once fascinated him now looked like a stranger wearing her skin. "Something like that," he murmured. "You need to stop drowning in it," she said, her tone light, rehearsed. "You built your empire. Now live a little." He smiled faintly, not at her words, but at the bitter irony of them. He had lived in illusion too long. Now, finally, he was awake. "You're right," he said softly. "I've been blind." She paused mid-bite. "Excuse me?" He leaned forward, elbows resting lightly on the table. "I said I've been blind. About what really happens in this house." Her fork froze above the plate. For a heartbeat, the room went still, only the faint hum of the air conditioner breaking the silence. Then she laughed. A slow, soft sound meant to fill the gap between them. "Darling, what are you talking about?" "Our daughter," he said quietly. The laughter died instantly. Her hand trembled just slightly before she placed the fork down. "What about her?" "She doesn't draw anymore," he said, his tone careful, measured. "She doesn't sing. She doesn't laugh. You know why?" Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "Children go through phases." "No," he said. "Victims go through phases. Fear isn't a phase." The color drained from her face. He could see her mind racing, building defenses, lies assembling like soldiers. "You're overreacting," she said finally. "You've been distant, paranoid. You work too much. You see ghosts where there are none." "Then why did Marta leave?" he asked. That caught her. A tiny flicker of panic passed across her eyes before she forced a calm smile. "She was unstable. I had to let her go." "No," he said. "She left because she was afraid of you." He pushed back his chair slowly, the legs scraping the floor with a sound that sliced through the silence. Evelyn's poise cracked. She rose too, her voice sharpening. "Enough of this. I won't be accused in my own home." "Then tell me I'm wrong," he said, voice low, deadly calm. "Look me in the eye and say you never hurt her." For the first time since he'd met her, she hesitated. Not long, just a flicker, but it was enough. And in that flicker, he saw everything. "You don't understand," she whispered finally. "You were never here. You left me to raise her alone while you chased headlines and board seats. I kept order because someone had to. I disciplined her because you wouldn't." He stepped closer. "You call that discipline?" "Children need boundaries," she snapped, her voice rising. "And if you'd ever been present, maybe she wouldn't have needed to fear me to behave." The words echoed, bouncing off marble and glass. He didn't flinch. He just looked at her, the woman who used to be his pride, now standing like a cornered animal dressed in diamonds. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the USB drive, and placed it gently on the table. "You've taught me a lot about control," he said softly. "Now let's talk about proof." Evelyn's gaze locked on the small object, her breath catching. "What is that?" "Everything," he said. "Every moment you thought no one saw." Her face drained of color. You wouldn't dare." "I already did." She took a step back. The first real sign of fear. "You'd destroy this family. You'd destroy yourself. Do you think the world will pity you? They'll call you negligent. They'll say you knew." "They'd be right," he whispered. "I should have known sooner." Tears burned behind his eyes, but his voice stayed steel. "You broke something that can't be fixed, but you won't break her again." She stared at him, trembling, not from guilt, but calculation. He could see the gears turning behind her eyes, searching for leverage, for escape. Then she laughed again, a hollow, chilling sound. You think anyone will believe you? You think I'll let you ruin me? I don't need them to believe me, he said. I just need them to see. Silence. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the faint hiss of the candles burning down. She stepped closer, eyes blazing. If you show anyone that footage, I'll take everything, the company, the house. You'll lose her anyway. He smiled for the first time that night, slow, deliberate, dangerous. You've already lost her. Evelyn froze. From this moment, he said, you don't touch her, you don't speak to her, you don't breathe near her. Her lips parted, trembling, rage, fear, disbelief mixing together. You're making a mistake, she hissed. Maybe, he said quietly, but at least it's not hers. He turned and walked away, leaving her standing under the chandelier's glare. The perfect wife, surrounded by perfect light, her shadow stretching long across the floor like the truth finally spilling out. In the reflection of the dining room mirror, she looked smaller than she ever had, and for the first time, she wasn't performing. She was exposed. The following morning, the mansion was silent again. Evelyn's place at the table sat empty, a deliberate message. She'd gone to her mother's estate for space, leaving behind a trace of perfume and a trail of dread. He didn't follow. He had his own errand now. By noon, he was sitting across from his attorney, Daniel Cole, a man who'd handled billion-dollar mergers, but never the unraveling of a family built on violence. The conference room's glass walls looked out over the city skyline, the very empire that bore his name. From here, he'd always felt powerful. Today, he felt small. Daniel leaned forward, fingers steepled. You're telling me you have video evidence of abuse? He nodded once, sliding the USB drive across the table. More than enough. The lawyer hesitated before taking it. And this was recorded on your private security network? Yes. Then it's admissible, assuming she doesn't claim tampering, but he sighed. You understand what happens if this goes public? Headlines, lawsuits, shareholder panic. You'd be fighting for custody of your daughter and the company at the same time. He stared out the window, jaw tight. I don't care about the company. Daniel studied him. You say that now, but this footage, if leaked, could dismantle everything you built. Then let it burn, he said flatly. The lawyer leaned back. She's ruthless. I've dealt with women like her, charming, connected. She'll twist this until you look negligent. I was negligent, he whispered, but not anymore. For a long moment, Daniel said nothing. Then, if you're serious, we'll build quietly. Documentation, custody petition, a financial firewall so she can't drain you dry. He nodded. Do it. As Daniel began taking notes, the billionaire's mind wandered, not to the business but to the gala stage, her voice echoing through applause. We protect innocence. The hypocrisy still stung. He could see now how far her influence reached, the charity boards, the media outlets, the political donors. Evelyn Harrow wasn't just a socialite, she was a brand. And brands didn't die quietly. He left the office with more enemies than he'd walked in with. That night, he watched the city from his penthouse window. Every light in the skyline was one he'd built, yet the home he'd built for love was the only one that had rotted from the inside. He made one phone call before turning in. Marta, he said when she answered, voice shaking with relief. You're safe, aren't you? Yes, she whispered, but she's looking for me. Don't come back, he said firmly, no matter what she offers. A pause. What about the little one? He stared into the night. I'll get her out, whatever it takes. And as he hung up, the storm outside rolled closer. The glass walls of the penthouse trembled, but for the first time, he didn't, because he finally understood. Wealth wasn't protection. Truth was. The house was too quiet again, the kind of silence that hides intent. Evelyn had returned 2 days later, smiling as if nothing had happened. She kissed his cheek. At breakfast, poured him coffee, complimented his tie. The act was flawless, but he could see the cracks now. He played along, smiled, nodded, pretended the storm had passed, but behind his calm eyes he'd already prepared the trap. While she was away, he'd installed hidden microphones, small, almost invisible, behind the light fixtures and under the grand piano in the living room. He'd rerouted the camera feeds to an external encrypted server beyond her reach. Every step she took now would leave a digital footprint she couldn't erase. He'd learned from her game. And he intended to win. That evening, Evelyn hosted one of her intimate dinners. 4 guests, 2 socialites, 1 journalist, 1 political donor. All influential, all eager to bask in her glow. She thrived on it. He led her. She dazzled them, laughter sparkling like champagne, lies flowing as easily as her wine. But he noticed something new. She was nervous. Her laughter came a beat too late. Her glances toward him were sharp, searching. She knew he was watching, but not how much he'd seen. When dessert was served, she leaned toward him across the table, whispering with that razor-soft tone. "I hope you've come to your senses, darling. We can still fix this." He smiled. "We're already fixing it." She frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" He met her gaze. "I've been recording everything you say, for days." The color drained from her face. Their guests were still chatting, oblivious. He rose smoothly from his chair, leaning close enough for only her to hear. "You taught me about appearances," he murmured. "Now it's your turn to live behind them." Evelyn's composure cracked, just enough to reveal the tremor underneath. "You wouldn't," he smiled. "You thought that about the cameras, too." Later that night, after the guests had gone, she stormed into his study, fury radiating off her like heat. "You're threatening me in my own home?" she hissed. "No," he said calmly. "I'm protecting my daughter and ours." She slammed her hand against the desk. "You're sick. You're making things up. Do you think anyone will believe a man who ignored his family for years?" "Maybe not," he said, his voice deadly calm. "But they'll believe what they see." He turned his monitor toward her, the live feed from the cameras playing on screen. Her own image stared back at her from the hallway footage, every cruel gesture now recorded from multiple angles. "Smile," he said softly. "You're on camera." For the first time, she stepped back, speechless. The silence between them thickened. Her eyes darted from him to the screen, calculating, furious, cornered. "You'll regret this," she whispered finally. "Maybe," he said. "But you'll remember it." She spun and left, the slam of the door echoing through the halls. But he stayed still, watching the screen, watching her figure retreat through the hallway, unaware that every step she took was now a confession waiting to be played. He turned off the desk lamp, his face cast in shadow. The faint red recording light blinked in rhythm with his heartbeat. The hunter had become the witness, and the trap was set. The night of the charity gala arrived again, the same event that had once crowned Evelyn the queen of the city's compassion. But tonight, the kingdom was about to crumble. He'd planned every detail, every camera, every spotlight, every word. To the world, this was another evening of generosity, another elegant performance hosted by the Harrows. But behind the scenes, the guest list had been hand-picked. Board members, press representatives, and a select few with the power to end her reign. Even Evelyn didn't suspect. She entered in a gown the color of wine and arrogance, her diamonds blazing brighter than the chandelier. She greeted guests with her usual charm, kissed cheeks and shook hands. No one saw the tightening in her jaw when she glanced at her husband, who stood calmly at the podium, waiting for the lights to dim. When the final guest was seated, the music faded, and he stepped up to the microphone. "Good evening, everyone," he began. His voice carried across the hall, smooth, steady, deceptively calm. "Thank you for being here tonight to support what truly matters, protecting the innocent." Polite applause. Evelyn smiled tightly from her seat, unaware of the tremor in his words. "My wife," he continued, "has often reminded me that truth begins at home, that what we do behind closed doors defines who we really are." That line made her shift uneasily. "Tonight," he said, his gaze locking on hers, "I'd like to share something personal." The projector behind him flickered to life, at first just static, a faint hum, a grainy blur. Then a frame appeared, a little girl sitting on her bed, whispering through tears. "I'll be good. Please." The ballroom fell into silence so profound it felt holy. Gasps rippled through the crowd, chairs scraped, forks clattered. Evelyn's face drained of color. "Turn it off," she hissed under her breath, but the footage kept rolling. Her voice filled the speakers, smooth and venomous. "You embarrass me again, and I'll make sure you never forget it." The room froze. The philanthropist, the advocate for children, stood exposed under the brutal honesty of her own voice. She sprang from her chair, rushing the stage. "You think this proves anything?" she shouted, shaking. "This is manipulation. He edited it. He's obsessed." He stepped aside, calm, letting the footage speak for itself. Another clip played, timestamp after timestamp, her cruelty stripped of context and excuse. The audience didn't look at her anymore. They looked through her. She screamed again, but her words scattered under the weight of truth. "Stop it! Turn it off!" He finally spoke, quietly, devastatingly. "You told me once that appearances are everything. Tonight, I gave you the chance to keep yours. Honestly." Security stepped forward. Cameras flashed. The charity banners behind them looked obscene now, protecting tomorrow's children. Evelyn tried to speak again, but her voice was drowned by murmurs, by disgust, by the slow sound of her own empire collapsing. He didn't gloat. He didn't smile. He just looked down at his daughter's face on the screen, frozen mid-tear, and whispered a silent apology only he could hear. When he turned back to the microphone, he said simply, "This ends tonight." The lights went out. The screen turned black. And when they came back on, Evelyn Harrow was gone. The fallout was instant. By morning, her name was on every headline. Philanthropist exposed, hidden abuse inside Harrow Mansion. The footage had gone viral before dawn. The same journalists who'd once praised her were now circling like vultures, feeding on the spectacle she'd created for herself. Her sponsors pulled out. Her charity board dissolved. Her social media accounts were flooded with disbelief and rage. And then, finally, the police arrived. He didn't attend the hearing. He couldn't. He stayed home with Lily. When she asked where Mommy was, he told her the truth, a softer version of it, one she could hold without breaking. "Mommy's not feeling well," he said gently. "She's going somewhere to get help." Lily's eyes, still too big for her small face, searched his for something. Guilt, sadness, betrayal. Instead, she found only sincerity. "Did I make her mad again?" she whispered. He knelt down, his hands trembling as they cupped her cheeks. "No, sweetheart. None of this was your fault." Tears welled up in her eyes. "You promise?" He swallowed hard. "I promise." She hugged him, small arms wrapping around his neck, fragile but fierce. For the first time in months, she didn't flinch. Days passed. The mansion that once felt like a gilded cage now echoed with peace. He sold the wine collection, the art pieces, the jewelry Evelyn had flaunted. Every check went into a new trust, one with a name that mattered. The Lily Foundation, for children silenced by fear. He spoke little, worked quietly, but his resolve deepened. For once, his wealth built something pure. At night, he'd sit beside his daughter's bed, reading until she fell asleep. Sometimes she'd still wake with a start, whispering, "I'll be good." And every time he'd answer, "You already are." The words became her healing mantra, the first step in unlearning fear. Weeks later, he returned to his study. The security monitors were still there, blinking idly. He sat in front of them for a long time before pressing the power button. One by one, the screens went dark, until only his reflection stared back. He whispered softly, "No more watching, only living." Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, a gentler sound this time. In Lily's room, crayons rolled across the desk. On a fresh sheet of paper, she drew again. A house, a son, and a father holding her hand. No shadows this time, no erased faces, just color, just peace. Weeks turned into months, and the city slowly forgot the scandal. But inside the quiet mansion on the hill, the echoes of that night still lived in the walls, faint, haunting, but no longer bleeding. The billionaire sat alone in his study, the same room where it had all begun. The same monitors, the same chair, the same camera feeds that once showed him the worst night of his life. Only now, the screens were blank. He'd kept them that way, disconnected, unplugged, silent. But tonight, for reasons he couldn't explain, he powered them up one last time. The old system hummed to life, a ghost exhaling after months of sleep. The flicker of light washed over his face, familiar, cold, and merciless. Camera 14 blinked red for a moment, waiting for him to watch. He didn't. He just stared at the feed until his reflection replaced the images. The man on the screen was older now, worn, quieter. Not the ruthless tycoon who measured love in success or safety in surveillance. Just a father who'd learned that sometimes the hardest part of protecting someone is knowing when to stop watching. Behind him, small footsteps padded across the marble. "Daddy?" He turned. Lily stood at the door in her pajamas, holding a piece of paper. Crayon stains colored her fingers again. "I drew something for you," she said shyly. He smiled. "Can I see?" She handed it over. A drawing, simple but alive. A bright yellow sun, a garden, a house with no cameras, no shadows, and two stick figures, a man and a little girl holding hands beneath it. "That's us," she whispered. "I see." His voice cracked softly. Then her tiny finger pointed to the top corner of the page, a small square drawn in red crayon, a blinking dot. "What's that?" he asked. She smiled. "That's the light, but it's not scary anymore. It means you're home." He felt something shift deep in his chest, not pain, not guilt, just warmth, small and steady like the pulse of that same red light. He reached over and turned off the monitor. For the first time, the room went completely dark. No hum, no flicker. He scooped, his arms, her head resting on his shoulder. The soft rhythm of her breathing filled the space that silence had once owned. As he carried her down the hall, past the framed portraits and the shuttered cameras, the moonlight spilled across the floor, real light this time, unfiltered, alive. In her room, he tucked her in and brushed a strand of hair from her face. She stirred, whispering in her sleep, the same phrase that had haunted him for months, but now it sounded different, peaceful. "I'll be good," he smiled faintly, whispering back, "You already are, my girl. You always were." He stood there for a long moment, watching her chest rise and fall. Then he turned toward the doorway, and in the distance, the faint reflection of the old security camera blinked once, not as warning, but as farewell. He reached up and pulled the plug for good. The red light faded, a final heartbeat of the past extinguished. Outside, dawn was breaking. The house that once recorded every sound finally breathed freely again. And as sunlight poured in through the glass walls, he realized something profound. For the first time in years, he didn't need proof that his home was safe. He could feel it. The light that used to watch them was gone. The only light left was love, and it was enough. Fade out.